but you have to have a vision of where you want to go. And you're not going to know the exact steps to take, but getting that vision clear in your mind. And most people think, I want financial freedom. I want a lot of money. I want that house. I want this relationship. But from what I'm learning is you already put yourself in that situation, just like you're a kid. You already imagine you have it. And that's how you have to operate.
So I think the best course of action is almost having a vision and setting 5-year increment goals and kind of having that little flexibility towards that vision. Hey friends, you're tuned in to the Learn or Be Learned podcast, a show where wisdom meets curiosity in order to discover the human experience. I'm your host, Shiva D, and remember, you either learn from or you're learned from. Now, let's get back to the show. All right, welcome back everybody to another great episode here on Learn or Be Learned. Today's guest is Dr. Jeff Anzalone, and he is a periodontist who also had an interesting story where he realized he needed to make another stream of revenue of income in order to diversify his talents and attain financial freedom, attain financial independence, and he's now on a mission to share his knowledge and help people do the same. I don't want to get too much into his story because I think it's interesting and I want him to share. But Jeff, thank you so much for being here. I'm glad to have you on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Looking forward to it.
Yeah. So, before we jump into everything, do you mind giving a little bit of a backstory of what you do and how you got here?
Yeah, I'm a periodontist by trade. Back in my childhood, I noticed growing up that my friends' dads that were dentists, they were always either coaching us or they were at all the games or whatever. And then my friends' dads that were physicians, most of the time they were working, weren't at the games, because I was kind of trying to go back and forth between what I wanted to do. Plus, I had some family members that were also dentists, and more of the lifestyle. That's why I chose it. And now I'm only practicing 3 days a week. But fast forward to, I'm from a kind of a smaller town in Louisiana. I had planned on, because when you go to medical school, law school, dental school, whatever, they don't teach you the two most important things. Number one, about money, and number two, about how to run a business or practice. So what we do is typically we'll go in and we're relying on the person that we're going in with or group or whatever to teach us how to manage the practice and that sort of thing. I was supposed to come back to my hometown here and join a group. I've been talking to them along the way. And just a couple of weeks before I was getting ready to finish, I called them and I said, hey, look, here's my graduation date and all that. And it was like silence on the phone. I knew something was up, And come to find out, those two people were having issues amongst themselves, and they didn't disclose that to me over that past year. And they said, you know what, just adding somebody else to the mix just wouldn't be good. And it's just like, are you kidding me? You're just now telling me this. I could have found something else. So at that point, my wife and I, we had a 2-month-old who's now 19 now. So time flies. $300,000 in student loan debt. Now, this was 2005, so this was before the 2008 real estate crash. And I told a local banker that I was joining this group and we really wanted this house to buy. And he said, oh, yeah, I know you'll make good money going in with them. We'll make it happen. It was literally just signing a few sheets of paper and that's it. So we had a house now we couldn't afford. But the thing is, it really put me into survival mode, because I grew up probably like most people, coming from a family, had that scarcity, that limited mentality about money. That costs too much, or we can't afford that. Everything's limited, and we can't go on vacations, but maybe once a year just to the beach or go visit my grandmother or something. And that was just that's how I thought it was. You save your money, you clip coupons, you go to the buy one, get two free, all that kind of stuff. So I lived that my whole life. So when I took that into account, so when I had all this debt, it bothered me, but it didn't bother me too much because I knew I was going to be getting out and making good money. So when this incident happened, it really set me back big time. And at that time, Dave Ramsey and Susie Orman were the two main financial people out there. And I'd been listening to Dave Ramsey's show for a while. And I'm really glad I was able to have somebody like that just to kind of give me structure, because I was just all over the place. And as you may or may not know, he has the 7 baby steps to get out of debt and become financially independent. And we started that process of paying off all the debt, smallest to largest. And after about 7 years, we wound up paying off all the $300,000 in student loans plus that first house. And that's what we got to that point at that point in my life.
You said how many years that took?
It was about 7.5 years, roughly.
Mm-hmm. And you got into real estate, correct? Was this around that same timeline of the 7 years, or was that after you climbed yourself out?
Well, after, it's kind of like when you hit a goal, you took 7 years to hit a goal and you're thinking, okay, when you hit this goal, that's it, life is cruise control, and it lasted for about a day or two, like kind of like, now what?
Yeah.
So I thought I was going to be like every other dentist and work until I'm 65 or 70, because that's what they all do around here, and then retire and maybe travel or whatever if I'm healthy. But about 2 years after that, after paying off everything, we went snow skiing, and our kids were 8 and 6 back then. And I had a little accident and I fell and I injured my wrist. And that was really my wake up call, because it's kind of hard to work on patients, if you can't use your hands. And I knew that I had to do something about it, but I didn't know what to do. So I was looking at it more for extra income streams, more for just financial stability and risk mitigation, not like I want to go out and buy a bunch of Lamborghinis or something,
Right.
And what I started doing, I started studying how wealthy people operate, like really, really wealthy people. And I noticed a couple of things that stood out. Number one, the majority of them had real estate in their portfolio, and at that time I had zero. And then number two, the majority of them had multiple income streams, 7 to 9, and kind of an average of 7. At that time, I had 1. So it really helped me narrow my focus on, all right, I got to figure out a way how to do this real estate thing with having a practice on the side and a family for multiple income streams. Mm-hmm. And I started networking with friends and going to meetings, and because I thought I had to go out and buy a property, rent it out, start collecting rent. And little did I know, once I started going to different meetings and that sort of stuff, there's all kinds of different ways, to get into real estate. And I eventually found that for especially a high income, busy professional, something called a real estate syndication, which is a group investment, I can go into it more if you need me to, was the thing to do, because you could, kind of like the stock market or a mutual fund, you could put your money in and get a return on your money, but you could still stay focused on your day-to-day job. And as you did this, so for instance, if you put money in a 401k, you can't tap into it till you're 59 and a half. Well, that doesn't help you now if you get injured or you want to retire early, right? Mm-hmm. So these syndications, every time you put money in, they're giving you a return back, typically quarterly. So you're just getting all these multiple income streams in. And that's what, a lot of these wealthy people did. And another so literally everything that I learned from school about money or from my family, whatever, I had to go back and relearn it because it was all wrong. Because you'll hear people, these billionaires, they don't pay taxes, and you're like, oh yeah, right, whatever. But once you learn what they're using in the tax code, it's right. Mm-hmm. Because when you
Right.
ask them what do they do for a living, they don't say I am anything. They don't say I am a doctor or I am a lawyer, whatever. They say I own. I
Mm.
own businesses. I own real estate. And guess what? So as a doctor or high income professional, the more you make, the more taxes you pay. That's active income. And people just accept that. Just, okay, well, I made a lot of money, but man, some people actually brag that they pay a lot of taxes, which is the stupidest thing I've ever heard of. But if you're not educated like I used to be, yeah, I could see that. But the goal is to get these income streams coming in, and when they come in, these are some of the lowest taxed income streams there is. But more importantly, it's freeing up your time, and that's the most valuable thing. You can make money and all this thing doing stuff online or side hustles or whatever, working extra shifts, but it's your, at the end of the day, it's your time freeing
Mm.
you up to do stuff like this, to where I'm don't have to work full time. I can do this. I can share my story. I can help, hopefully, let other people know that are trapped in the rat race like I used to be, that there is definitely a way out.
Mm. That differentiation you made is so strong and powerful that helped me make a connection, right? When you said these wealthy people, they say things like I own, not I am, which is so true, because if you see it, they just own more and more assets, and then that becomes kind of what they're doing, right? Even like what Mark Cuban owns a sports team, right? So they just own assets and operate from that kind of standpoint. Um, Another thing that's, I can kind of relate in parallel was I used to be on the medical path. I was on my way to becoming a doctor, and I completed pre-med, MCATs and everything, and that was kind of like my whole identity for most of my life, is kind of, that's where I wanted to be. And a strong one of many variables was this idea of not understanding debt and finances and, time horizon. And it just didn't make sense to me at the time, especially because I was yearning for wanting to try entrepreneurship and try things on my own accord. And that was kind of the shift and push for me. Why? And then I realized, there's nothing wrong with the medical field, but they don't teach you finances, and they don't teach you how to manage your debt and things of that nature. And honestly, most fields, they don't teach you that at all.
I mean, look at pro athletes. They get out of college and they go from broke to millions of dollars. And guess why most go bankrupt? Because in the
Right,
Bible it says, "To much is given, much is required."
right.
If I've got a 19-year-old that plays college football, well, his friend that he went to high school with is projected next year to go 12th pick in the NFL. He plays at
Mhm.
LSU right now, and he'll be 20 next year. And I asked my son, I said, "Can you imagine getting a bonus check for $5 or $7 million? I mean, if you didn't have any guidance or whatever, what would happen with it?" He's like, "I'd probably just blow it, because it's like
Yeah.
you can't handle it." So that's the same thing with these physicians, and we get out of dental school or medical school, or whatever, and we've just been so focused on learning our trade, we don't have a clue.
Yeah.
And once you get trapped and you get in that lifestyle, it's hard to break out of it. So it's really important to at least become aware of your starting point and what you need to do to break free.
Right. And also just the patience of waiting that long in order to earn such a high income, right? You feel that urge to spend once you finally start making some, as well as, these people that are in their 20s making millions of dollars. I mean, it's practically like they won the lottery, right? They don't know how to manage that money because it wasn't gradual. It was such a sudden shift
Hmm.
that their identity couldn't keep up, right? Because if you look at very wealthy people, they have this mindset of how to operate and make more money, right? Like, for example, a multimillionaire, if they lost everything, and I've heard this several times, it's like, well, if I lost everything, I can make it back, because they spent the years learning how to make that money, which was more important than the money itself. Versus a lottery win is very terrifying, because if things like, for example, your hand situation, right? If an athlete breaks their leg, how are they going to make $7 more million next year? That's a very terrifying thing to think about.
Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm. What is some of the mindsets that you had to shift within yourself in order to start making more money or more streams of income?
I think probably the biggest mindset shift came from you either hate him or you love him, Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad Poor Dad. But he had a concept in that book. Plus, he has a whole other book that's centered around this. It's the cash flow quadrant. And my mindset shift was about how most people don't think about how they make money. They just go to work. But once he stepped back and showed this cash flow quadrant about, you have a cross, and on the left side is the poor side, and it's you're an E on the top left or an S, self-employed. 99% of people are either employees or they're self-employed. Well, I thought going from an employee, because I got out working for somebody, I always wanted to own my own practice. So I always thought I want to be my own boss. Once I do that, I got it made, but I'm still just an employee, just in a different situation, because I'm still trading time for money. If I don't show up for work and treat patients, no money comes in. And that's the trap. And all of that money, whether you're an employee or you're self-employed, it's active income. It's the highest tax income. It's even worse when you're self-employed because you have to pay self-employment tax. Whereas you're an employee, at least you can split it with your employer. And most of the time people want to be employees because they like that security, that job security. They like the benefits, whether it's health insurance, 401k, other types of insurance, whatever. And I mean, I can't tell you how many people that I know personally that are absolutely miserable in their jobs, and they're just like, man, it's got 2 more years left. I'm just doing it just when I retire, get the benefits. And it's just like, man, that's 2 years of your life or 3 years, whatever. You're wasting. You're miserable because of some little Peasley benefits. But that's the system. And that's how I would have been until I realized how I was making money. So the goal is to get onto the other side of the quadrants. The B in the top right is the business person, or the I, the investor. That's what we talked about, the business owner. Think of a gym owner that a friend of mine owns a gym. He doesn't have to be there. He can go, that's the thing. He has all these people running the gym. You're a business owner. You have employees running it, whether you're there or not. Unlike, somebody like me that's self-employed. And then the goal is to get to the I, the investor, where your money is making money for you 24 hours a day. And again, all of those types of income streams are the lowest taxed income streams. But then that was the mindset shift. So I had to figure out, okay, how am I making money? I'm self-employed. Now I got to figure out how to get from the left side to the right side. And you don't know what you don't know. So if you don't even know how you're making money, then how can you even begin to start? So once for people watching this or listening to this, figure out, how are you making money? If you don't go to work, do you get paid? If not, then you need to get to the point to where your money is working for you regardless. And there's all and literally everything that I've learned about that pretty much is online for free. Because when I did all my training, say I finished in 2005, my wife made me get a phone in 2005 because we were having our son. So all before that, I never had a phone. Guess what else started in 2005? Something called YouTube. So during my whole time training, I had YouTube didn't exist. And people have like the world at their fingertips, that they can find out how to do anything. And it literally everything that I've learned to build a 7-figure business has been online for free. But what do most people do when they get on their phone? They just jack around and watch silly stuff. Well, spend an hour a day educating yourself. So you can still watch silly stuff, but it's all free. It's there. But the thing is, and I've learned this from coaching people and dealing with people that people have to pay attention. People have
Very
to
true.
pay attention. And I can have a conversation with somebody for an hour and they won't do anything, but I can charge somebody $1,000 and they'll come with a pen and paper in hand. It's just a different mindset.
So true. That's so true. Yeah. That is probably as powerful as it gets, right? Because I think for some reason in our brain, we don't value what's free. We take it for granted almost. And then you charge someone some crazy prices and they'll listen very keenly. And I think that's very interesting because I'll even see videos from, Bedros Koulian or Alex Hermosi, different entrepreneurs that do the same thing. They post videos on YouTube, right? Which most people won't even watch because it's free. But then, they also have services where they charge like $25,000 for coaching. But I'm sure if, you paid a price like that, you would show up with a pen and paper and listen as much as possible, probably even prep for days, like have questions, think about everything that you could possibly ask, right? So you have a good point. I mean, we value what we pay for, which is, I guess just playing into the human psychology of it. But I also like the point you mentioned about the quadrants and shifting from self-employed to business operator, which is, I'm guessing, is the bridge when money starts working for you, correct? That's
Because once you start learning this, make sure that you have regular conversations with your kids. There was a kid at my house last night. I have 2 teenagers, and the kid was a senior in high school getting ready to go to college. And I said, "What are you going to major in?" He said, "Kinesiology." He wants to be a physical therapist. And I said, "That's great." But I said, learn your trade, learn how to treat patients. But I said, but at the same time, when you get out and you're learning how to treat patients, be thinking about, how can I replace myself? Mm-hmm. How can I own a business where physical therapists are working for me and I don't have to be there? And he's like, "Man, I didn't even think about that." I said, "Well, again, you don't know what you don't know, but again, it's how you make money." So that would be my recommendation to people that own their own business. Figure out how to replace yourself as quickly as possible. That way, again, it's just going to free up your time. You can still work as much or as little as you want, but again, you've replaced yourself and it's just a different way to operate.
Yeah, from my understanding, the wealthier someone is, the more they've created a chance for them to be replaced, right? So let's say, for example, from being a physical therapist, they hire a physical therapist. Now they're just operating the business. Then they hire a manager so they don't have to operate as much. And then, for example, the hire, bigger companies, they'll hire a CEO so they don't have to be the CEO anymore, right? Like they just hire people so they are more replaced and don't have to work as much. Therefore, the money's working for them. Is that more or less correct?
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Is that I'm assuming, the path you took in order to make the 7 figures, or is that something you realized after making your company or successful?
No, just so all the real estate and different deals that I do and work with people and everything that's I would just say that's non-clinical, I learned online for free. Yeah, well, I did pay, I think, $300 or $400 to learn how to start a blog, debtfreedoctor.com. But everything goes back to that. If I would have never started the blog, you and I wouldn't be talking right now. It would just it snowballed from there,
Right.
So everything that I was learning about real estate, there wasn't really many people teaching it to doctors and dentists. So I just said, well, let me start this blog. I didn't know how to do it. I literally, at that point, I knew how to turn the power button on my computer and I could go to Google to search the internet. That was it. So if a redneck from Louisiana can do it, anybody do it. But again, with anything, you have to have a strong enough why. And my why was what happened to me. I have to do this. Whether I keep failing, I have to do this to provide for my family if something happened to me. Mm-hmm. If you don't have a strong enough why, like if you want to lose 20 pounds or whatever, 99.9% of the time people get on a diet, they quit because they don't have a strong enough why. But if you have a chest pain and you go to the doctor and he says, if you don't lose 50 pounds, you're going to die in 3 months, that's a pretty strong why.
Right.
And you're going to put up the Bluebell ice cream, and you're going to exercise, and you're going to eat right. But so with anything that you want to do, you have to have a strong enough reason to do it, that you're doing it. Because if not, 99% of the time, it's just not going to happen.
Do you think that reasoning just comes to you based on life events, or is it something that you search for?
It could. I mean, it's got to come from within you. If it's got to come from you,
Mm-hmm.
like I have a relative that was approaching 400 pounds, and he'd been told for years and years and years, man, you got to lose weight, blah blah. Nothing.
Right.
One day out of the blue, just it clicked. He went and got a consultation. Didn't even say anything to anybody about it until like the day before his surgery. And he had one of those lap band surgeries, whatever. And now he's lost about 150 pounds.
Wow.
So it was just something that just clicked.
And there was no external circumstance that kind of pushed that day.
And I asked, and he basically just said he just realized he was getting to the point where he wasn't being able to enjoy his kids, the stamina and energy, and he knew it was getting worse. It wasn't going to get better.
Right.
And that was it.
Almost just fed up at that point.
Yeah.
Notice.
And he knew he couldn't do it on his own, so he had to do something.
Right.
And he did it, and we're all proud of him.
Mm-hmm. Then I guess, that also makes sense, right? Comfort is almost like the worst enemy because you're in the middle of the scale. You have to kind of tip the scale one way or the other to actually see momentum, right? Either you need something to run from or to chase in a way in order to hit the goal. Because if you're like right in the middle,
mm-hmm.
you kind of just are stagnant, right? For example, what you said with your family member was, everyone's telling him, but he's just like, I'm still in this middle area. But when he got fed up, it was like, okay, I can't enjoy anything anymore. What's the point of like life if you can't enjoy anything?
Right.
So that was the push to get to the other side almost.
Yep, that's true.
Mm-hmm. And I'm guessing that's the same mindset with you and wanting to make more money in a different way, correct? Is you was operating from this idea of if something were to happen to my only source, I'd be back at where I was with the 300K debt and stuff like that. Was that a driving factor?
It was, we at that point we had a certain lifestyle, and there was no other income streams coming in. And as you know, if you have kids or when they're, you're younger and you have a kind of a smaller house, and, as they grow, things get more expensive. Things don't get cheaper in anything. Yeah. And I'm looking back, and I like to focus on 5-year increments, setting goals every 5 years. Because if you go out, if you do try to do 10 or 15 or 20 or more, it's just like looking back, our lives have completely changed every 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
So think about if you have a 10-year-old kid and you're having a conversation with them, that's going to look light years different when they're 15. Mm-hmm. They want to go and throw the ball with you and this and that. At 15, they want you to go get them a car because they want to go out with their friends. And again, it's just in 5 years. So what you think is going to happen in like 10 years, there's no way to know. There's really no way to know in 5 years, but at least you've got some more short-term goals to set to keep you motivated.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I think the 5-year increment makes most sense to me when I look at timelines, because I've tried the idea of looking at how far 10, 20 years could go, but there's just so many variables that, in a matter of a day, your whole goal could shift, right? Like you said, you thought that you needed to do real estate, then you found syndications. Just a matter of, one day, learning something new could completely shift the timeline of what you were thinking was going to happen. So I think the best course of action is almost having a vision and setting 5-year increment goals and kind of having that little flexibility towards that vision.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that because, and I haven't, and I'm on podcasts all the time, so this is the first time I'm going to actually publicly say this, but I've, um, and I'm a slow learner, and I've heard, I always listen to podcasts or YouTube videos or read books, and really all these successful people, they're always mentioning this thing, but I'm always just like, whatever. And it's about like meditation and manifestation and that sort of thing, visualization. And I've really just now to the point where I've just started learning about it and learning the science behind it. And it's really fascinating. It really is. And it really makes you think back when you were a kid, you did it all the time. You imagine stuff, you had imagination, and I looked at my kids and they were building these forts in the den, and they can, oh yeah, look, Dad, you come in here and here's this chamber, so they had it all. But then what happens when you go to school? It goes away because they take your imagination away. You can't think for yourself. You have to listen to what they're going to say, and they're going to teach you what they want you to hear, and they want you to sit down and be quiet for the next 20 years.
Right.
And you take a kid when they're 5 or 6 and you look at them, and then you take them after college, it's just like a totally different person. They're just almost like a zombie,
Mm-hmm.
and you almost have to relearn everything again. You have to go back and to how you used to operate. And the pro athletes, especially like the golfers, they do, they're visualizing their shot, what it looks like before the go. And I'm not going to get into it, but what I'm just now starting to learn. But yeah, that's what I'm working on now, the next phase of my life. And I'm already starting to see, just from some of the different things that I'm doing now, you just have like these coincidences happen, or these opportunities, people that will reach out to you out of the blue, and it's just like, wait, where did that come from? It's just all about your energy levels and that sort of thing, the signal, the frequencies
Mm-hmm.
that you're giving out. You probably not know way more about it than me, but I'm just now getting into it, and it's really fascinating because the worst grades I had in college, the 2 C's that I made in college, were in physics.
Mm-hmm.
But now I'm learning some of the physics terms from this quantum physics and the fields and that sort of thing, and it makes sense now looking back of how it works. And so it's very interesting to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think that type of stuff gets such a bad rep because it was just almost dismissed as, delusion, just, nonsense. But if you really think about it, even if someone who, Steve Jobs starting Apple or creating the Macintosh, right? It all started with imagination, vision, and how he saw it, right? He was so particular with his vision that if the specs of the device didn't look exactly how he wanted, he was like, no, go back and do it again. I mean, he had this vision of what it would look like, and he wanted to bring it into reality, which I find so interesting because with any big goals, I think people do to some extent visualize it first, imagine it first, like we did as kids. Even with my show here, it was an idea, it was imagination first.
Everything's
When
a
I brought it
thought,
back,
just think
everything
about
is a
that.
thought, right? It's a
You
thought
go
before
ride
it's a
by a
reality.
building,
Yeah,
that was just somebody's thought initially.
right.
And you talk about Steve Jobs. One of the things that I was studying this, he always talked about connecting the dots. You can always connect the dots going backwards to look. Okay, you just asked me how to get in real estate. Well, I can look back at my life and I could connect the dots. Well, I started a blog, and then from there I started a YouTube channel, and then from there started going there. So I could connect the dots going backwards. But guess what? You can't connect the dots going forward. So you have to have a vision of where you want to go, and you're not going to know the exact steps to take, but getting that vision clear in your mind. And most people think, I want financial freedom, I want a lot of money, I want that house, I want this relationship out. But, from what I'm learning is you already put yourself in that situation, just like you're a kid. You already imagine you have it. And that's how you have to operate.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I'm learning about. And when you start doing that, that's when you start attracting these different circumstances, and everything's energy and frequency.
Right.
And, I'm a believer. I believe that God, provides all of this. Whether you believe or not, it doesn't matter. But it's just interesting to learn how, and when people dismiss it, I'll just say, well, look at your phone. Your phone is on a frequency,
Mm-hmm.
and I can call you or you can call me, and that frequency, the airwaves goes to a cell tower, and so that everything is energy and frequency. Works the same with the brain and that sort of thing. So again, it's really, I'm not going to get into it. It's really interesting what I'm learning about it. And I encourage people just to learn about it. You don't have to believe it, but just learn what's out there. And then you just try some things out and, see if it works and go from there.
Right. It's so interesting. If you look at the brain, it almost creates a self-fulfilling prophecy of whatever you're thinking about, right? Your brain is a filtration system. And so if, for example, if you're in a victim mindset, your brain actually actively looks for events that would support that bias, right? Like the confirmation bias of I am a victim. Let me look for examples as to why. So when you say something like you have to think that you already are there, is super interesting, because what your brain starts to do is create and look for opportunities that would support that image of what you are looking for. So if you want to be abundant, you're actively looking for opportunities which end up, could be coincidences or whatever, but you see those doors open. And it's almost like the brain's filtering which doors are open and which are closed based on how you are thinking about it, which I find very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said about emitting this certain energy, I've talked to friends before, and I've told them, they'll say things, we're talking about maybe they have some self-doubt or imposter syndrome or something, and I tell them, this thing about confidence and trust and belief, right? It comes from this idea of within yourself. So how can someone else trust that you're going to produce the vision that you say you are if you can't trust yourself to do it? So it starts internally, and you kind of emit this energy of, I'm going to do it, just don't know when, don't know how, but it will happen. People start to trust that because of this, frequency that you're kind of showing that embodies yourself. You can call it conviction or whatever, the strong belief, but I think that's just super interesting about, there's just so much to it. And I think science is starting to show us more and more kind of how this works within our mind and everything. I find it so interesting.
Yep, for sure.
Mm-hmm. I also have looked into some stuff that Steve Jobs has talked about, and his idea that you mentioned about connecting dots in the future is super interesting, because he was able to connect different industries ahead of its time, right? From streaming platforms like Apple Music and iTunes to the iPad and the computer and the phone. It's just his ability to forward think and connect dots in the future versus most of us can do that in hindsight. I think it's such a strong skill set that, I don't know. Do you think it can be learned? Do you think it's a gift? Have you noticed? Have you been able to do that in the recent years? What's your thoughts?
Well, from what I'm reading and studying about it, it's just a learned skill. You have to practice it, because
Mm-hmm.
when you start to do the visualization initially, and you start. Here's the thing: most people don't know what they want, and I coach people all the time financially, and that's the first question I ask: what do you want? What do you mean? What I want? When you get up and you go to work every day, I mean, what are you trying to accomplish? I don't know. Well, maybe you don't have what you want because you don't know what you want.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's say, hey, I'm going to go on a vacation this summer. All right, where are you going? I don't know. Do you think the tickets are ever going to be, airline tickets are going to be booked? Do you think the
Right.
hotel? It's not, and you have to become clear on what you want. And most people have issues in three areas of your life: health, wealth, and relationships. So just start there. Okay, what do I want my health to look like in 5 years? what I want my wealth to look like, and what I want my relationships to look like. Maybe you're great in 2 of those and you need help in 1. Okay, we'll start with that. But if you
Right.
don't know what you want, and again, this is all coming from me learning all this. I didn't know what I wanted until, you don't know what you don't know. You just
Mm-hmm.
get up and you go, you're looking what everybody else is doing. Okay, well, everybody is working until their retirement age, and then everybody is complaining about the stock market. Hopefully the stock market is up when they retire. If not, they got to work longer because they're relying on a 401k. And it was just like, once I realized that is the dumbest thing ever, I would never want to be in that position. But I was on that path.
Right.
So, and some people are happy with that, and that's fine. But because whatever's right for you is right for you. It's not right for me, but I want control of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And everything that I was doing, somebody was controlling it. Somebody was controlling when I retire. Somebody was controlling, my health and making the decisions of what we eat and drink and, and all these things. I was looking at what everybody was doing. I was just doing the same thing. Well, you do that, you're going to get the same result, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but it just comes down to, what do you want? And it's just amazing once you find that out and visualize it. I'll be 50 this year. 50 years ago, in 1974, if I would have told you 50 years ago, hey man, in 50 years or less, we'll be able to have this device in our pocket, and we can call each other, and we can look at each other, called FaceTime, from anywhere in the world. You just thought I was freaking nuts. But it
Better
just
than that,
takes
you
it
can do
just
that in a self-driving car too.
Yeah. Yes. But the thing is, it takes a thought. Somebody thought of that. And then the process worked, but somebody had that vision. So you have to know what you want, that vision, in order for even to start the process. So that's pretty much the gist of it and that's why I've been studying it and reading it about it. And again, this is the first time I've ever talked about it.
Right.
So maybe we'll come back in a year and we'll have another podcast, and I'll let you know if it worked or not. How about that?
Right. Do you think partially the idea of what you want stems from understanding who you are, right? So for example, you mentioned the 3 pillars of health, wealth, and relationships, which I love because I advocate those 3 pillars all the time, because I've seen it time and time again where people will focus on 1 or 2 and this foundation's not very strong in their life. They don't feel ultimately balanced or fulfilled. Do you think that stems from an idea of also who you are, right? So what do you want stems from who you are. I want to be a great father. I want to be someone who has multiple streams of income, who doesn't have to worry about, am I going to have a job tomorrow? I want to be someone who can run a marathon, right? Do you think that building block is who you are and they're kind of not sure about their identity?
Yeah, I guess, yeah, in a way. But again, like we just said, if you don't know what you want, then who are you?
Right.
You're just like everybody else. You just get up and you're in the rat race, and you everything is just automated. You have the same routine. You get up, you maybe eat breakfast, you shower, you brush your teeth, you get in your car, you go to work, you work for 8 or 9 hours, you come home, you commute, and you just do it over again.
Right.
Everything's just automated. And people don't even think about doing something different. And you can. And my thing is, I just want to bring that realization to people that you can do whatever you want. Right. You just have to, number 1, know what you want, and then number 2, once you do, then things will start. Then you can start working on it.
Right. And I think that's where we unfortunately see some people take the leap of trying to figure out what that is, while others will indulge in some sort of escapism, right? Whether it's like gluttony of food, just eating all the time out of stress or whatever, or Netflix, or just whatever, drinking, whatever that escapism is for them, in order to kind of, release that sort of tension of not figuring out what they really want in life. And I've seen that a few times, which is unfortunate. I think that's one big purpose of doing what we do, right? Trying to help people talk about is there's ways out of the rat race. There's ways out of, feeling the way you do. There is, better life if you can visualize it.
For sure. Again, it just starts with, like you said, knowing who you are and figuring out what you want, and you got to figure out your starting position. Where are you right now in life? What's your starting point?
Right.
And again, in those three, health, wealth, and relationships. Think about it. You could be a billionaire, but you're bedridden. What's the point?
Right.
You're not going to have many relationships, and you're not going to have your health. You can't get up and do anything. So you have to kind of figure out where you're lacking, and then focus on what you need work on, and then go from there.
Right. Or let's say you're making crazy money, but you never get to spend time with family or friends.
Yeah.
Then what are you making that money for? Right.
Right.
You can't spend it with anyone.
Yep.
And so, Dr. Jeff, I want to ask you one last question that I ask all my guests. This show is called Learn or Be Learned. So I like to ask, what is one lesson that either you learned from someone or you want the audience to learn from your life that you'd like to share?
I think it is what we've kind of been talking about here at the end, and it pretty much encompasses everything that we've just talked about the last almost hour, is figuring out what you want in life. And once you figure that out, then, and if you need to, read the book Start With Why, Simon Sinek, and that really helps you to figure out, and it'll actually help you figure out what you want too. And then you got to have a why behind it. And once you do that, then you can start the steps to changing your life to life's too short just to go through life just to be miserable and stuck in the rat race or whatever you're doing now. And everybody has a way that they could to break out of that mold. But again, it starts with figuring out what you want. And once you have that, get that strong why. And again, just focus on 5-year or less increments. Not, I want to retire in 30 years. It's like, well, how can I retire in 5 years or less? Get really, you start thinking differently.
Right.
When you do that.
Right. I think if there's any big takeaway from this episode, it's really what you said. Figure out who you are, what you want, and you need a strong enough driving force. Otherwise, you're not actually going to move to get there within a short enough time horizon. Short, but long enough to achieve, right? 5 years. I mean, like you said, life is too short to not shoot for your dreams, but long enough to achieve it, I would say.
Yep. That's true.
Mm-hmm. Well, Dr. Jeff, thank you so much for being on this show. I think the audience is going to find this a very enlightening conversation and have some, guidance towards getting their own ways. And I appreciate you being here.
Yeah, I enjoyed it, and I look forward to after a year learning what I'm learning. We'll come back and we'll reconnect.
Absolutely, that'd be great. Thank you.
Yes, sir.